This is Jason Marsden, the voice of Duke from G.I. Joe Renegades. You're listening to the GeekCast Radio Network. Yo, Joe.
You're listening to the GeekCast Radio Network. Partner Spotlight. Unleash the geek in you.
Hey, I'm Gary.
I'm Greg.
I'm Chuck.
And I'm Justin.
Join the four of us every week on the internet's #1 G.I. Joe podcast, What's on Joe Mind?
That's right. It's Joe news, reviews, and special guests like you've never heard them before delivered right to your MP3 player.
Think of it as Joe Talk meets sports talk. And we make fun of Chuck.
Right, hey.
We're just kidding, Chuck. Kinda.
Yeah, sometimes Chuck makes fun of himself.
Right, hey.
It's What's on Joe Mind? Every week on the GeekCast Radio Network, InsidePulse.com, Stitcher Smart Radio, and iTunes. Download and listen today.
Can I say something about Transformers?
No.
Hey, this is Barbecue, and you are listening to What's on Joe Mind.
Hello and welcome to GeekCast Radio. This is episode 67. This is the start of the Syndication Nation Spotlight here inside GeekCast Radio. We are doing, I believe, 12 or 13 episodes. Each episode is going to be dedicated to one of our partner podcasts. Kicking it all off is, I believe, the first, if you don't count the lunchroom, the lunch table, I believe the first ever partner podcast we had, which is What's on Joe Mind. I am, of course, one of your hosts, TFG1Mike. Joining me is Steve Megatron. Hello.
Hello.
And from What's on Joe Mind, we have Gary.
Hi.
Justin.
Hello.
And Mike.
Las cucarachas entran, pero no pueden salir.
Alright, Steve is going to be kind of heading this one up this time around, and take it away.
Okay, so basically we're going to find out how you guys got into podcasting.
Actually, not for the rest of the guys, but I think I had the least amount of experience of the three of us, four if you count Chuck. I've been thinking of doing podcasting for a while prior to starting What's on Joe Mind, and just never got around to it. I talked with a couple other websites about doing it, and just never got around to doing it. But I did listen to podcasts before, such as other partner podcasts with the GeekCast Radio Network, Star Joe's. I listened to them. Other friends of the programs, Whooshcast, listened to them, but never had any real experience prior to getting into podcasting. I just kind of jumped in very much with both feet and kind of learned the hard way, just about every step of the way. But now, after, over 150 total episodes now in, I think I got it down a little bit, maybe. I don't know.
You've overcome your crippling personality flaws.
Says Mike.
I thought that was Chuck's job.
Chuck hasn't overcome his crippling personality flaws.
No, I don't think that'll ever happen. You say that you kind of jumped in with both feet, Gary. And that's kind of the same thing I did, and I've been learning ever since. The learning process for podcasting never stops. I mean, people say, "Oh, well, TFG and Mike, you've been in it for X number of years now, and you're a pro." Well, I wouldn't say I'm a pro. I'm not getting paid for it. Not that I would want to, but it's like it's a constant learning experience.
Well, like, what year did you guys get into it? Like, start doing podcasting itself?
11 was when we started the show. And if you want to talk, if you want to talk pros, the pro of the group is actually Mike. He actually did radio for a living at one point, as well as his brother. He would know more than any one of us about really how hard this is. The hardest part for me really is the whole editing process. And to give the GCRN some credit here, I mean, once we joined up with the network, Mike and Steve, you guys were helpful with suggestions of things that we could do to make the editing process better, or better equipment, or better programs to record the show. But it's been, I pretty much for the last year haven't really tweaked our show any, because I think we found a format we finally like. But we're not professionals, but we do have some professional blood, and that would be Mike.
I'm touched.
Well, that's your cue to actually see. He's a professional, but he can't pick up on a cue if he was given one.
Sorry, I was coughing. What do you want from me? Well, thanks, Gary. But yeah, I was the guy who was dumb enough to get back into this in college. Had a brief, if you want to call it a career after that, of trying to do this for a living. Determined pretty quickly that it's no way to pay the bills, because nobody has bills that are that low. And so if you wanted to, I'm probably the one who is the most natural, most comfortable, I should say. I wouldn't want to say natural, but most comfortable saying crazy things into a microphone. And as such, I think it's kind of played into the role a little bit. I tend to be the one that either wears the black hat, that plays the bad guy, or that plays the silly guy, or and kind of frees everybody else to do their thing. That being stupid allows Gary to be the host, and it lets Justin be the expert, and it lets Chuck
be the fall guy.
Yeah, and so I think that my role is I'm no slouch with GI Joes myself. I'm a pretty smart guy, and I've done my homework, and I've done a little bit of writing, and not to blow my own horn, certainly not to the degree of somebody like a Justin Bell, who is indisputably our expert. But it is kind of funny sometimes when we're out at say at con, when the three of us are all together, and we're all talking, but strangers come up to us because they hear me. And we've got a number of folks on Facebook who are just who the three of us all met simply because they came up to us at con and said, "Hey, you're Mike from What's on Joe Mind, aren't you?" And I kind of point at the other. It's like, "Yeah, I am. It's good to meet you." Blah 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 blah. What do you think, Gary? And they don't and they don't pick up on that. It's like, "Oh, you must be Gary, and you must be Justin," and they get them reversed or something.
Most of the people are below Justin, though. So
that is true. That is true.
They're too small for Justin.
The plebes do not register on Justin's radar. He is the super fan.
I look down and say hi while on the throne that you guys are carrying me on your shoulders.
Oh God!
It's nice of you to say that too. It's
now all as I can picture is Justin in one of those old timey Amazon throne chairs, and the rest of you guys carrying.
Thank God he is the skinniest of the four of us.
That is true, but I got to tell you, if there's you wouldn't think so, but Gary and I are pretty hot in those Roman style tunics.
Wow. Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. How do we recover from that?
Hot. Hot, baby, hot.
You should ask Justin Bell how he got started in podcasting.
Yeah, there's that.
Well, actually, I did do a brief stint. There was an old website called Quick Kicks Theater, who changed actually to JoeGuide.com a number of years ago. I want to say 2006, 2007, and I actually did recaps of some Sigma 6 cartoons for him on his podcast, but the Sigma 6 cartoon was so terrible that I think it gave me a rash just trying to record recaps of it, so that didn't last very long. But then...
I thought you liked that show.
I like Sigma 6. I don't like the show. The show was terrible.
Okay.
I like
the line.
Yeah, I like the toys.
Great toys, awful entertainment.
Absolutely. So then I had my whole website thing going on, and when Chuck and Gary and Greg at the time invited me to be a guest on What's on Joe Mind, I think was like the second episode, and I agreed.
About 2 or 3 in, yeah.
Yeah, and I agreed and came on the second episode and just kind of never left. So I came as a guest and stayed on for almost 3 years now. So
refuses to leave.
Exactly. They keep on trying to do these shows, and I just kind of show up and keep recording, and they're like, get out of here. But I just don't take a hint.
Well, didn't you do a couple episodes of the granddaddy of them all, the G.I. Joe review?
I did, yes. I did do a couple episodes of G.I. Joe review as well. Yep, with Christopher and Chad and Matt and those guys. So yeah, I did some guest spots there too. Good point.
Can't haunt their place. Gotta hang around by us. I swear he gets in through the windows.
Oh, that's Chuck.
He squeaks in through the closets.
No, Chuck can't fit in through the window.
Chuck is inside. We don't grease up the sides of the windows for Chuck to get through.
They let him in the closet.
Ooh,
the peeping hole.
Did you just say you keep him in the closet? Oh my
God! Keep him in the closet.
That means Chuck has to come out of the closet.
It's awful that people such as Gary and myself are sitting here making fat jokes on people, but
it's still a low blow.
It is. It's terrible. We're not good people.
Bell can. We really can. I'm in no position to talk, but
I don't know. I've seen Justin's before picture. I don't know if he can.
Oh yeah. There's
true.
that.
Yep,
there's that.
Time.
I've seen Justin before the Cobb salads. Which is Justin is I pick on, but Justin is actually. I've struggled with my weight for a number of years, and there have been times where I've been successful with it and times when I haven't. This happens to be one of the times where I'm not. Gary's known me long enough to know that is the truth. There have been times where I'm in pretty good shape. There have been times where I'm in terrible shape, and I'm pretty obnoxious through all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But Justin is one of the people who I keep in mind as somebody who wins his battle on a regular basis. Justin is actually somebody I look up to quite a bit in that regard. So I don't want to come off like a total dick.
I don't even know how to respond to that, Mike. Thank you.
Other than the fact that he actually admitted to being a dick.
It only took 152 episodes.
Yeah, it took a while.
I don't know. I'm pretty open about that, frankly. I really don't hide.
Well, the funny thing about that is when we
I'm
all
honest
started
for an asshole.
That's true. When we started the podcast, we pretty much had no show personas whatsoever. It was pretty much straight laced. Here is the news. Here's discussion points. Here's what we got in, and we're out. And after a while, the show personas started developing on their own, and that is either to no scripting whatsoever, but a lot of it's because of audience interaction when people would write in things that Chuck would say, or things that Mike would say, or things that Justin would say that eventually just get cemented in the show lore. There really is. We do act this way in public to an extent. But there is some show persona that does go on. Mike, when you don't have a microphone in front of him, isn't such of an a-hole. Justin, when you don't have a microphone on him, does talk a whole lot more. So there, after a while, it seemed like it kind of started to sound a little bit like a shock jock morning type show where we had a straight laced guy, a bumbling guy, and then you had like the two hosts that bounce things off each other. And that wasn't planned at all. It just developed on its own that way.
I'm gonna draw back to I was not on the show as a regular at the beginning. I had a job that got in the way a little bit more and would have prevented me from being part of things all the time. But I was the guest host. And I do think that the first time I was on the show back in episode 3, I think was the first time anybody actually made fun of Chuck on the program.
He had it coming.
I mean, granted,
your microphone sucked that first episode too.
Oh, it was terrible. It was really a piece of junk. And the one I had for the next episode, I was on. I did a different mic for that one, and that one stuck too. It was a learning process. I was out of the game for a little while.
Yeah, you have to upgrade equipment. What I've found in podcasting is you have to upgrade equipment at least every 2 to 3 years, unless you find something that completely works and doesn't screw up after a while.
Well, like I started out with a $9 piece of junk microphone that plugs into the back of the tower, and just a regular headset, and then I switched to a USB headset microphone, and then after that I switched to buying this $110 blue microphone because it sounds better. So, but I've found that every few years, I mean, I like to upgrade with something new and add something else to the process. Like recently, I just got new software, so I like playing around with that. But I mean, it's all incremental stuff that helps grow the show more or less.
It does help the show's growth when people can actually hear you. Yes.
Yes.
That is my own personal experience.
Yeah, we learned that the hard way.
You were muted, Mike. What'd you say?
Exactly. But as far as the origins of the program go, we would be remiss to not talk a little bit about Greg, who was the original third chair or second chair, however you want to bill him. And I think as far as setting the groundwork for What's on Joe Mind as a news show, I think he was a big help as far as getting that going, as opposed to just being four guys who sat around and just talked crap all the time, which I think half of our fans think we are, but we actually do try to provide a service. So we do owe Greg a big tip of the cap, and as far as getting things going.
Yeah, I was kind of like I was listening in the beginning, and I was kind of a little worried about how the dynamic change was going to go by the time Greg had left the show, and it didn't change. I mean, okay, sure, a new voice, but the dynamic was still there, and it was still cool. I remember when you guys released, it was a few years ago. You released the edited and unedited version of your interview with Kevin Michael Richardson, and I listened to both of those, and I'm like, yeah, the unedited version is so much better.
Well, what was it? It was the first question that I'll never forget. That's when you know you're in for a good night. Justin asked him the first question. Hey, so we hear that you Kevin, you played Roadblock on Renegades. And we hear that Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, will be playing Roadblock in the movie. Who do you think's going to make a better Roadblock? And the answer, without missing a beat, without a half second of silence, well, I can tell you whose dick is bigger. Yeah. But this is going to go down as one of the classics.
Well, one of the reasons that the synergy stayed is Mike and I have known each other for close to 10 years now. At the time, it was about 7 years at the time. But now it's close to 10 years. And Mike and Justin have known each other for about that same amount of time as well. So we actually have personal relationships with each other. Oddly, and the odd one of the group is Chuck, because none of us have ever seen Chuck in the flesh, which I don't know if it's good or bad. He stays inside the Emanuele compound and only comes out when he needs fresh air every now and then. But if the synergy, anything, it got better because I know Mike for a long time. Justin knows Mike for a long time. I've known Justin for a long time. So we have a bit of a personal relationship that we're able to build the show. And if the show sounds like we're friends, and we are genuine friends, I mean, there's some editing that goes on that makes the conversation a little bit snappier and that type of thing, but there's no falsehoods there. We've all known each other for close to 10 years, with the exception of Chuck.
And to clarify some on that, for the folks at home, we do like Chuck. We are friends with Chuck.
We do.
Chuck
reluctantly.
Chuck is in on the joke.
Or is he?
See, Chuck, I tried.
I will never forget that first ad Gary sent me at the very end of it. Oh my god. This is so hilarious.
Oh, the
first podcast ad you guys recorded.
Can we talk about Transformers? No.
Still can't. And then the second one, I guess I can't. I still can't say anything about Transformers. No.
Yeah. You need to make a third one here eventually.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you guys have done a great service to the G.I. Joe community. I know there are multiple other Joe podcasts out there that are specifically... Like, Star Joe's, I've worked with Ryan. I'm going to be working with Chuck here in a little while. But
another Chuck.
Yeah, Star Joe's Chuck,
Yeah.
not What's on Joe Mind
Right.
Chuck. Not,
And that's how we refer to him as well. It's Star Joe's Chuck.
yeah.
When we see him in person, he is called Star Joe's Chuck.
Is I don't really count them because they're not specifically G.I. Joe, but I've seen some of the other G.I. Joe specific shows, and you guys by far kill them all.
Well, we appreciate that. We owe a great deal to the guys that did G.I. Joe Review. And I shouldn't say did in the past tense, because they're still doing them, just at a much slower pace. We know all the guys that have done the show personally. Well, again, we have personal relationships with them as well. We owe them a great gratitude. The guys that did Flag Points really had their niche. Their niche was, let's talk about memories and vintage Joe. We discussed doing that for a long time, but really with me, Mike, and Justin, is like, oh yeah, did you have the vintage Cobra Trooper? Yeah, that was cool. Moving on. You know, it's like, yeah, what more can we possibly say about it? Those guys, they could say, a whole lot more that they wanted to say on it. If anything, what we would be getting into if we were talking about vintage Cobra Troopers, we'd be leaning on the side of what the Classified does, which we're also involved with. So we'll let the Classified take the torch when it comes to talking about vintage Joe and the history and the archaeology of Joe. When it comes to customizing, Justin's a customizer. He's pretty good. I'm squat at customizing. So's Mike. So the Joe Customs podcast, which sprung up after ours as well, that's their wheelhouse, their niche. We're really here for commentary, news, opinion, and to
star-studded celebrity interviews.
Well, yes, we do have a lot of interviews and everything, but it's to cut through the BS that you see on the board sometimes. It's like you just want to hear just a sane opinion, and that's where someone like Justin Bell comes in. See, Justin, I called you sane.
It's a step in the right direction.
Okay,
there's some nights where you can just cut the tension between Justin and Chuck with a knife. Will they or won't they?
But I do like the fact that we have lasted the longest.
Everybody ignores it and moves on. I love it.
I like the fact that we lasted the longest. We have the largest library. We have the biggest audience. And I thank everyone that's continued to listen and, has started listening here recently or have been listening since episode 1. It means a lot, and it means a lot for you guys to say that, you like the show after all this time.
So, what got you guys into why G.I. Joe?
I guess we're going way back for this one.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to do long form of it, but
well, no, because that frankly we'd be here all night.
Year.
Yeah, between the three of us. When I was a kid, as I was fortunate enough to be able to dabble in lots of stuff. I had a brother who was close to me in age, and a younger brother who was not too far behind, and so it was. I think G.I. Joe was the one that stuck because it was something that we could all play with at the same time. It was the figures were cheap enough that we could all have a good number of them. Sometimes we'd have the same ones, sometimes we'd have different ones. We all got to play with most of our favorites most of the time. It was just it was a real kid-friendly kind of property in that regard. And then when you throw in there that there was such a great comic book connected to it and such a great television series connected to it, And even though the two of them didn't have anything to do with one another, it just kind of it keeps those fires going, and it keeps them, keeps you stoked about it. I think of all the, I've still got a lot of my crap from when I was a kid, or have had it until recent years. We dabbled a little bit in Transformers, didn't really stick. I don't have a lot of interest in Transformers past G1, and even then, just the first couple of years of it. I was out of it pretty quick. Star Wars, as far as the movies go, love them. As far as the toys go, they disappeared as soon as I realized that Joes have knees and elbows. And that's no lie. It was really no lie. It was like, remember sitting there, I've got Boba Fett in one hand, I've got Snake Eyes in the other. You've got the alpha male toys from both lines right there, and knees and elbows won every time. It was whatever. Go away, Boba Fett. You suck. And so it just kind of, I don't know. I guess when a seed gets planted that deep, it never really goes away. Most of us had our years where that seed got snowed over, so to speak, with puberty and middle school and high school, but I was back into Joe before I was done with college, and that's getting to be a long time ago. I've collected for longer now than I did when I was a kid.
Right.
Which is, when the math starts getting weird and hazy and we all feel old.
Yeah, pretty much. Everybody except Steve, since
I'm not
he's so young.
commenting. Yeah, I'm about to have my 10-year high school reunion next month. So
you go to hell, Steve.
You go to hell, and you die.
10-year high school reunion. You get him off of this. You get him off of this program.
This is where Mike would say, "Cut his mic."
Yeah.
Children.
What about you?
And he muted himself.
Yeah. What about you, Justin? Where did you get started?
Well, my story is actually really similar to Mike's. It was, way back in the 80s. I was a Star Wars kid back then, had a bunch of Star Wars toys, and was just at a local department store one afternoon and happened to see G.I. Joes on the pegs and noticed that, like Mike said, they actually had knees and elbows, and bought a straight arm Flash back in 1982 and a Cobra, and really never looked back. I don't know, it kind of started with having toys that moved better than Star Wars toys. That really kind of appealed to me at the beginning. And then once, I got my hands on the Larry Hama comic book, it was just, there was no stopping it going from there. Nice. Yeah, I mean, once, I started off with the toys, and then I had a little introduction to the cartoon, of course. I thought it was neat, seeing the characters in action was cool and everything. But then, shortly after I'd watched the cartoon, which, was full of lasers and everything, and I went over to my buddy's house and was looking through his oversized Treasury edition for G.I. Joe #1, and actually saw some Cobra Troopers getting shot with guns, and that it was, there were some consequences to what was going on here. Even as a, 8-9-year-old kid, that just had a much bigger impact on me than the animated series did, and it just kind of, that captured me, and I was a Larry Hama fan for life at that point. And unlike a lot of folks who kind of drifted in and out through high school and college, I never really did. I just kept on collecting the whole way through. And before the internet, I was buying Lee's Action Figure News and Toy Review and Tomarts and calling all the phone numbers in the back looking for people who were selling their stuff. And it's just
mailing lists off the alt.gi Joe Yahoo groups.
Exactly, yeah. I still remember being in college at the University of Vermont in the mid-'90s, early to mid-'90s, and getting on the bulletin boards and working out some trades and trying to keep up, because I lived in Vermont, and Vermont's like the only state, or it was the only state in the country at the time that had no Toys R Us and no Target department stores. It still doesn't have a Target in the entire state, although it does have one Toys R Us now. But back then, there was no place to buy toys, so
It takes 40 minutes to go across the width of that state.
It's not about width. It's about north and south. It's not about width. It's about girth, Mike. I'm sure you've heard that.
There it is. I was getting ready to say.
Girth is the new width.
But yeah, I was working out deals, trades, and stuff like that through the bulletin board. Anxiously awaiting huge boxes of stuff through my student mailbox, and it was interesting times. And then discovered eBay and just kept on going from there. So it started in '82 and it's just never stopped.
What about you, Gary?
My first Joe was a straight arm Snake Eyes and the HAL with Grand Slam. And that kind of just started the whole thing. It was right before Christmas. I said, hey, I need more of these. And by the end of that Christmas, I had all the figures and all the vehicles. Hasbro, as they mentioned, a regular guest of our program, Kirk, from one of the former heads of the brand back at Hasbro, Kirk Bozigian, said that you could own. Right. Yeah, I know. I practiced that just for you, and for Kirk. Just so you could say some guy's name right. But anyways, the idea of the Joe line at launch was that you could own one of everything for under $100. So at the end of the launch, I had one of everything. So there we go. I dabbled in Star Wars. I believe I had all of A New Hope's toys for the first time, or for the first movie, quote unquote, at the time. I had most of Empire Strikes Back, but again, it came down to more realism for me. It's like, wow, it's an M16, and then I was like, oh, there's an Uzi. Well, what's an Uzi? And I open up a encyclopedia, and you can read about an Uzi or a grenade launcher or a bazooka. And it's like, okay, these are all real-world items. Rock and Roll's carrying an M60 machine gun. You could read about that. That's something that you could see a real picture of. And that turned me on to say that, this is our future possibility with, like, military. G.I. Joe was always set a little bit into the future. And then, much like Justin, once I got a hold of the comic books, good night, over. There was a whole Larry Hama world of his mind and his fiction and his vision of G.I. Joe, and I was pretty much hooked from there on out.
So what? I don't think we've ever covered this on our show, so we'll give you a little what's on Joe Mind exclusive content here.
Yes,
Justin, what was your first issue of the comic book?
Well, I had that Treasury edition of issue number 1, which I still have. But as far as and then my history with the comic is really weird because I didn't buy it regularly every month until issue 31. But when I read the Treasury edition, I made several trips down to various comic stores to pick out kind of scattered issues here and there. And then Sears back in the 80s, used to sell these comic like packs, like you would just order these boxes of random comics, and I happened to get 26 and 27 and like 30, the 31 that I mentioned, and like 33, I think, and then immediately ran to my local general store, found 31 on the shelves there too, and bought them from 31 up. So technically my first issue was that Treasury issue of issue number 1. But then I kind of sporadically jumped in and out until issue 31, and then from there on it was ongoing.
What about you, Gary?
Issue number 16, Night Attack. It's not my favorite issue. It's my first. My favorite issue remains at number 11, though.
16 is a pretty cool issue.
16 is really cool. Ironically, it's the debut of CoverGirl.
Yep.
Gary, the bane of Gary's existence, CoverGirl.
Wait, why?
He doesn't like women. I don't know if you know that.
Ooh, if that was the case, he wouldn't be married.
No.
Oh, does Debbie know about that, Gary? Oh, I'm sorry. I might have let us. Okay.
So,
Gary, go ahead and describe your feud with CoverGirl.
It was that non-scientific vote that Hasbro and Devil's Due did back. What year was that? 2005, 2006?
I
yeah,
think
it was 06.
Yeah, I think 06 is when the figure was out, so I think the vote probably happened in 05. But.
Hasbro was coming out with these comic packs, and the fans said, hey, you need to do one for Devil's Due, who was doing a comic at the time. And Hasbro finally said, okay, yeah, we'll do one, and came out with like a list of 5 different combinations of the 3-pack. And one had like the new Serpentor, one had This is what I vividly remember. Obviously, one was CoverGirl, one had the new Serpentor with the new armor, and one had Wraith, which was the new villain they came up with at the time, which was super badass. It was like the first new badass villain they come out with, really since probably Destro, Major Blood, Zartan, somewhere in there. It's been a while, but this was a really cool villain. Who else did they had Heart Wrencher.
They had some Cobra Coil versions of Xandar, I think, and Firefly or something like that.
So they put it all up to votes, although you could never see the totals. And then all of a sudden, the vote was over, and then the winner was announced CoverGirl. It was CoverGirl, Spirit, CoverGirl, and Hannibal, which was one of the offspring of Serpentor, or a clone of Serpentor.
It was a really strange set of circumstances. They had all these packs that were really highly desirable characters, but probably would have been pretty expensive to build. And then they had this one selection that had some really CoverGirl was the only one that all the fans seemed to really want, and but it used a lot of reused tooling and stuff, and kind of mysteriously that pack won. Although, like Gary said, they would never give you any running totals or anything. It was kind of a matter of, trust us, this is the one you guys voted for. And meanwhile, it had CoverGirl, which a lot of people were looking for, but then it had Hannibal, which was like this random teenager from one storyline about Serpentor that really didn't make any sense. And then it had Spirit in kind of a new uniform, which was then repainted and re-released the next year. So it just seemed like kind of a weird, bizarre set of circumstances.
And on top of that, it seemed like almost overnight, they had the prototypes up and ready to show.
Right, yeah, exactly. Usually when toy production takes about a year, these mysteriously were ready almost immediately.
So you're saying that they rigged the vote?
I'm not saying there was a conspiracy, but I'm saying there's a conspiracy.
Sounds like it.
Such a bad issue of the comic, too.
It was. It was, really.
Just terrible. They recast CoverGirl as Scarlet Light. They recast Spirit as Snake Eyes Light. And then they threw a bunch of kids in it who you never saw again.
Exactly.
And
really, Hannibal was one out of 12 kids or something, and he doesn't, he's just some random teenager, some kid in a leather jacket and gray pants. And that
he was only notable because he was the one that you saw again.
Right.
You never saw any of the other 11 again. But for myself, my brother and I kind of shared the comics for a long time. He's got them. He's got most of those early ones now, but we were actually got on the board with the comic book at number 5.
Nice.
My first exposure to Joe's were from Rob.
Tanks for the Memories?
Tanks for the Memories.
It is.
Nice.
And a nice standalone issue to get started on, too, when you're a kid.
You're a kid? Awesome. It's a perfect issue.
Yeah. Because I'll be honest, when we saw the... I know it was groundbreaking to see the commercials for the comic book back in 1982, but I remember seeing those, and I remember looking over at Rob, and we both kind of were... We kind of came to the conclusion we weren't mature enough to describe it this way. But, the general feeling was, wow, that seems a little desperate, doesn't it? It was so much hype that neither of us were buying it. It was just past what our hype meters could handle even at that age. And then when we went to church in New York, there was a drugstore across the street. And Rob would sometimes pick up a comic book there. And they had just canceled Team America. And so instead he bought G.I. Joe, and the love affair was born. The first exposure I had to the toys were actually his as well. He got a Flash, a Snake Eyes, and a Cobra Trooper with money from his paper route. And then about 2 weeks later, I got to sub for him on his paper route. And so I took the money and ran to the local Woolworths and with my grandma. I got Stalker and a Cobra Officer.
Awesome.
So that is your exclusive content.
Yes. All right.
The origins.
If Cobra Commander, Destro, and Baroness put guns to all 3 of your heads and said, choose your favorite comic series of G.I. Joe, what company's series would you pick and why? Gary.
Oh, jeez. I mean, I think we just all hinted at it, talking about early issues of Marvel. That first
Marvel was great.
Marvel's run up into the 120s, 130s was pretty good. 140s and 150s got a little weird, and then they cut it off after a while. And IDW and Larry Hama and Shannon have done an awesome job with this new series they've done, the continuation, the 155 plus. But I would say Marvel by far, no doubt. Certainly the first 120, 125 issues were just awesome.
Yeah,
Mike?
I don't think it's a big insult to Larry to say Marvel now, because essentially, him and Shannon are there to recreate Marvel, and I don't think that would bother either of them. And so long as Larry's around to wish us a happy Arbor Day, then it's all okay. But that's another inside joke for the long-time listeners. But there have been the end of nothing ticks me off worse than I didn't think anything was going to tick me off worse than the middle part of Devil's Due when they took the book away from Brandon Jerwa. Except the end run of Devil's Due, which was just horrific.
Rushed.
Rushed is being kind.
I am being kind.
Yeah, but Justin, you go ahead.
But yeah, without a doubt, it's the Marvel stuff, and it's like Gary said, once it got to the 130s, 140s, it kind of fell off the rails. But the amazing thing is, if you sit back and look at it, 130 issues of a comic, that's over 10 years. So that's like 10 years of really great comic writing from Larry Hama back in the 80s. And yeah, there was ups and downs throughout those 10 years, but there's a hell of a lot more good than there was bad. So I think that's pretty remarkable that he was able to take a toy property that was essentially being seen as something just kind of cast off on somebody and do something amazing with it for a full decade. And so without a doubt, it's the Marvel series that gets my vote. But I will also echo Gary and say that what Larry and Shannon Gallant have done in recent issues of IDW's Real American Hero continuation has been phenomenal as well. But holding a gun to my head, Marvel gets it all the way.
We got to get Shannon back on the show.
Yes, we should.
With the Marvel, in the 130s, they were doing some kind of a Ninja BAT and Cobra Commander return, and then in the late 130s and part of the 140s, they had the Transformers Generation 2 introduction.
Yes.
And then they did the...
no wonder they went downhill.
Well, and then they did the Cobra Commander and Mindbender brainwashing everybody and his kid and Destro and Baroness and their transforming castle, and he got this battle armor to fight Snake Eyes and still got his ass handed to him.
And then the whole G.I. Joe in tiny letters featuring Snake Eyes and big letters across the front. Yeah, that got a little old after a while, too.
Yeah. Yep.
What other books are... Because I'm kind of, at some point, looking to get into the IDW stuff. What other stuff is IDW doing with Joe?
Currently?
Because I'm not a guy that likes the old stuff. I've learned so many bad lessons with Transformers.
Transformers comics that were Marvel were terrible.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There are certain stories that are good in there, but most of it is just haphazardly thrown together because they changed writers so often throughout that. And the G.I. Joe ones, I found that I actually enjoyed more of the Marvel run of that than I did the Transformer run.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're looking for IDW stuff, if you haven't checked out the Cobra title, then that's definitely something you got to check out. It's not currently still being published, but if you can get some trade paperbacks, definitely go and look up Mike Costa and Christos Gage and Antonio Fuso's run on Cobra, which is kind of the focus of the bad guys a little bit, but there's plenty of G.I. Joe action as well. It's a landmark series, one of the best G.I. Joe reads I've ever read aside from the Marvel stuff. If you're really adamant that you don't want to give the Marvel stuff a shot, I would focus on Cobra. Beyond that, I have a hard time really recommending something wholeheartedly. IDW has done some good stuff. Robert Adkins has done the art chores in some of the main G.I. Joe titles from a couple of years ago, and the Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow title I really love what Robert Adkins does. Some pretty cool stuff mixed in there, but nothing that has made the impact that Marvel did, and nothing that has made the impact that Cobra did. There right now actually currently isn't a main G.I. Joe title from IDW. It's taken a little bit of a hiatus throughout the summer. It's going to be coming back in September. So if you're looking to read something G.I. Joe oriented, September might be a good time to jump back on board and kind of see what the new main title is all about. We don't know a whole lot about it yet, but it's supposed to be kicking off then. But if you're looking for something relatively recent, I would say look for some collections of the Cobra title. That's going to be some fantastic reading.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not completely opposed to looking at the G.I. Joe Marvel stuff. I just know from looking at other stuff in general that anything beyond... anything 1995 and past, I don't care for.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the stories, it's not it's the art. The art in some of the old stuff is just, for my taste, it's just not for me at all.
Yeah, I think I mean, there's really, for the classic G.I. Joe title, I think, once Rod Wiggum kind of picked up the torch, which was in the late 20s, early 30s, there was a stretch for a good few years that the art was spectacular. But if you go back too much further, you start getting to Mike Vosburg, Herb Trimpe, and I love both of those guys. They were great for their eras, but if you're looking at that artwork these days, there's definitely something that doesn't really resonate with the more current art styles.
Yeah, Herb Trimpe was a guy whose heyday was drawing Hulk in the 60s.
Right.
And that's kind of why he got the gig on G.I. Joe, is that he had drawn a lot of army guys and a lot of tanks. As far as his work with the Joes, they're a little generic looking.
Yeah.
And it's just what he's used to drawing. If you're drawing a bunch of guys fighting the Hulk, well, yeah, the military guys tended to look pretty generic. He got the gig because he could draw a lot of them. And make him look believable, and it was kind of the same deal with G.I. Joe, only there was no Hulk running around. Mike Vosburg's he's kind of a transitional guy. He's almost a little cartoony. It's very stylized.
Yeah, it is.
And it worked for some characters, and it didn't work for some others. Like his interpretations of Dr. Venom and Quinn, I think, go a long way towards.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, those are what those characters are in our minds.
Yeah.
He's really the only one that got to draw them. And some characters like Snake Eyes, he did pretty well, and Hawk he did pretty well. But some other characters not so much. Short Fuse, I remember in particular, kind of looked like a gorilla in a green sweater.
Nobody cares about Short Fuse. We're talking.
Yeah,
about
I mean, nobody cared
show.
anyway. But honestly, I'm not going to start caring because he looks like a gorilla in a green sweater. So yeah, when Wiggum picks up, it really goes on. And Justin, the name's escaping me. Who picked up after Rod Wiggum? Who had a good long run after him?
I know M.D. Bright did a lot of stuff, but I don't think he picked up right after Rod Wiggum. There was Wiggum, there was Ron Wagner,
Ron Wagner, that's who I'm thinking of.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them kind of in there that were all pretty phenomenal. And a fun little piece of trivia for folks who aren't aware, Herb Trimpe, while he was drawing The Incredible Hulk, actually drew issue number 181 and 180, which was the first appearance of Wolverine. So Herb Trimpe drew the first ever comic appearance of Wolverine.
Awesome.
Yeah, when we had Herb and Larry at the same con in New Orleans.
I think so. Yeah.
It was I was joking with one of these guys that we were actually sitting at Wolverine Con.
That's true. Hamill wrote him for ever and ever, and Trimpe drew the first appearance.
All right, let's go around the table. This time for the cartoons. What is each of your favorite cartoon series for Joe, Gary? If you say Sigma 6, I'll punch you right through the internet.
Oh. Well, it's multi-answered here. I remember rushing home as a kid to watch The Mass Device when that first came on. the first miniseries. And then after watching that and said, hey, that has nothing to do with the comic, I was a little disappointed. But still, I love the mass device. That was the first Sunbow miniseries. Renegades, despite everything everyone says that's bad about it, there's a lot of good in Renegades. And the Resolute cartoon, I thought, was a whole lot of fun as well. So it's multifaceted there. I hit 3 areas, but those are the 3 particular series, or at least the mini series, and then Renegades and Resolute. I had a fun time watching those. Mike?
Second season of Geek. No, absolutely not. I think if I'm going to take a grand champion, I've got to take the Sunbow. Again, part of it's nostalgia, the wide variety of characters that you saw. It filled a lot of holes. I mean, part of when you have a toy line as big as G.I. Joe, you've got a lot of characters, and the cartoon kind of helped fill in some of those holes in playtime. Like, you didn't necessarily want to stop and think of a personality for everybody. So sometimes it made a lot of sense just to take the Shipwreck from TV, and
that was the voice of your Shipwreck.
That's how you played Shipwreck, you know.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of guys like that. But I will say that visually speaking, my favorite was Resolute. I think the character design there for those characters was outstanding, if the story was a little lacking. And Renegades would probably have a much stronger run at the top spot, but it just didn't run long enough. Boo.
Yeah. Damn shame they won't bring that back.
Yep.
Well, what about you, Justin?
Unlike the other 2, I'm not going to be wishy-washy and give all 3 answers. I will actually pick a clear winner, and to me, the clear winner is Renegades. Even though it didn't stick around that long, I thought it did a great job telling the G.I. Joe story. Had a nice mixture of Sunbow and comic histories. Really nice character-driven plot, and the animation was great, and no complaints at all. I thought Renegades is definitely my favorite overall G.I. Joe animated series that I've ever seen.
Why do you hate America, Justin?
One final thing before Steve wraps this up. Rise or Retaliation? Argument go. The movies.
Yeah, no,
So,
we got you there, but who do you want to start?
Whoever. Gary, I guess you can go first.
Which movie's better, Rise of Cobra or Retaliation?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, before even Mike says it, because I know what Mike's going to say about Rise of Cobra, it wasn't a bad movie because it made a ton of money. I still had a blast watching both, but my most favorite is Retaliation. I think the star power ratcheted up a bit with The Rock and Bruce Willis,
John McClane.
And yeah. Let's call it what it is. John McClane. The star power there was phenomenal. The fact that G.I. Joe Retaliation is their largest opening movie they've ever had, those 2 guys, says something. Now, a lot of people tend to overlook that because they didn't like the movie for this or like the movie for that. But that is not chump change we're talking about. That's the highest grossing opening day movie that both of those guys have ever had, and they're just huge stars in their own right. So I had a bunch of fun watching that. I had a ton of fun of us reporting up to its launch, talking with John Chu, the whole 9 yards. That whole lead up to Retaliation and then getting a chance to watch it was a whole lot of fun and very memorable, and I will never forget it.
Mike?
I'm pretty much the same reasons. Retaliation. I liked Rise of Cobra. I think other people liked Rise of Cobra too. I think we tend to forget, being as far into this as we are, that maybe these movies didn't do fans every bit of service that they wanted. But that's the problem with fanboys, is that so long as it differs from their version, they're not happy with it. I think the dollars speak for themselves. I think everybody who saw these movies kind of came away from them thinking, yeah, that was at least pretty cool, without thinking too hard about them and making for just a fun movie-going experience. Yeah, I mean, Retaliation was just it was a more complete effort, and it was nice having our little piece of it as well. And that's that.
It's kind of nice that we actually have a movie where Duke stays dead.
He's not dead.
He's not dead. He's in hiding.
He's not dead.
I've
said that from the beginning. It is a universe with nanomites and tiny robots,
which they didn't utilize in the second film.
True, but they'll bring it back.
Justin, what about you?
They're not keeping Duke and the Baroness on the sidelines again.
Retaliation was just a better movie. It was a more complete movie, I thought. More action, better acting, that type of thing. That being said, I do think Rise of Cobra told a kind of larger scale G.I. Joe story a little bit better, but Retaliation is still absolutely the better of the two movies.
All right, Steve, take it away.
So, with everything that's gone on with G.I. Joe, where do you see the future of What's on Joe Mind?
I quit.
Damn!
There's that over our heads right now.
Shouldn't the guy that isn't here be saying that?
No, he was fired.
No, we're still having ongoing auditions for the fourth chair. I think we're still up in the air on that in terms of who's going to be the fourth chair. We're still making episodes as applicable. I mean, we at the very start we're making them once a week, every week, and now it was once every couple of weeks, and now it's about once a month. And it's not like we're slowing down. It's just there's not that much to report on really. As this new movie starts kicking up and new toy line and everything, I would imagine that whole thing is gonna pick up again. So I would imagine that there's plenty of good content. We got a 100th episode on the horizon. We're looking at some changes for doing some rebranding and that type of thing. So I think the future is good, and there's still plenty of room for growth. The numbers have been kind of up and down. They've been on another upward swing again. So I think the next 25, next 30 or so are certainly bright as we go into episode 100 and into this next movie.
Sounds good.
Where can the listeners check you guys out? Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. Where can they get the podcast other than obviously iTunes? But
we're everywhere, baby. Everywhere.
That you might go.
I don't know. Oh, of course we're on iTunes. We are on Stitcher. Stitcher is Schmott Radio. We are on Podbean, whatsonjoemind.podbean.com. Mostly if you go to Justin's site at generalsjoes.com and just follow the links there, and you'll find our show one place or another. As far as social media, we do have a singular show fan page for What's on Joe Mind on Facebook. We do keep our individual Twitter accounts. Justin's is at General's Joe's. It's more to do with the site. Gary's is at Gary Godso. Chuck is at ChuckDog1999. Mine is at Mike Irizarry1. Most of what we tweet about generally has something to do with some realm of geekery, be it the show, be it G.I. Joe, be it what we watched on TV. Really, we don't. Our show is not. I think the strength of our program is we're not 100% G.I. Joe all the time, and so if you're just wanting to contact us, if you just got you just hear something you like and you want to react to that, and it has nothing to do with G.I. Joe whatsoever, we will still take you. We can't promise you'll be entertained the whole time, but we will still answer your tweets, and we'll still welcome you in as part of the family.
Of course, what's on Joe Mind at gmail.com.
Well, yeah, what's on Joe Mind at gmail.com. We have a voicemail. Nobody ever leaves us voicemail. Gary, what's our voicemail number?
I don't know.
Damn it, Gary.
Probably why nobody leaves us voicemail.
That's probably why nobody leaves us voicemail.
It's mentioned on every bumper that we have on our
Nobody
podcast.
listens to the bumpers.
That means no one listens to the GeekCast Radio Network bumpers.
Nobody listens to the bumpers.
262-515-WOJM.
All right. Next.
They hear Blanchard get on there and start talking about all these shows and 65 episodes about the second season of Mask, and everybody starts like, "Oh my God, that's." They start getting into the split seconds with those, don't they? And their eyes glaze over, and the drool starts to come. They're not listening to the voicemail number.
Yeah, don't even get me started on that show, because you want to talk about a painful show. I'd rather sit through Sigma 6 than sit through what I'm doing with Mask right now.
Oh.
Yeah, it's that painful.
See, I really only remember the first season of Mask, and I enjoyed it.
I'm telling, dude.
The theme song is the best part.
Yes.
The theme song and the very first assembling of the team are the two best parts of the show.
Oh, yeah.
We are currently after a 2-year hiatus, we just started Mass Mayhem back up, and we're on like the 40th or 41st episode in season 1, and it is so bad. Oh my God.
Oh, maybe that's just it. I think. Anyways, moving on.
Moving on. All right. So there you go. I'm sure I'll put an ad in here for What's on Joe Mind, so you can actually get their information without them forgetting what their information is. Way to come prepared to a podcast, guys.
I blame Chuck.
Chuck had that information. Who was supposed to invite Chuck? Yeah.
I don't think I could have sat here for the last hour. Anyway, coming up next on GeekCast Radio, it's episode 68, continuing the Syndication Nation Spotlight. This time we're going to have Star Joe's Ryan and Star Joe's Chuck for the Star Joe's episode coming up next. And then after that, an episode... What?
The Flag Point guys?
No.
Ask them about the running gags that we've started on their show.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Lord. Okay, I will.
Ask Chuck about his RHP.
Oh, God. Somehow I don't want to know. Oh,
no, you
God.
don't. You're right.
All right. Until next time, unleash the geek in you, and we will catch you later.
Hey, I'm Gary.
I'm Mike.
I'm Chuck.
And I'm Justin.
Join the four of us every week on the internet's #1 and longest-running G.I. Joe podcast, What's on Joe Mind?
It's Joe news, reviews, and interviews like you've never heard them before, delivered right to your MP3 player.
Our guests include Jason Marsden, Kevin Michael Richardson, and Matt Yang King from G.I. Joe Renegades, Larry Hama, Robert Adkins, and John Barber from IDW Publishing, and many more from around the online Joe community.
Yeah, it's guys talking about Joe. Think of it as Joe Talk meets Sports Talk. And we make fun of Chuck.
Right, and we... Hey, again?
Come on, Chuck. We're just kidding, kinda.
Sometimes Chuck makes fun of himself.
Right, and we... Okay, seriously, this is just getting ridiculous now.
It's What's on Joe Mind every week on the GeekCast Radio Network, InsidePulse.com, Stitcher Smart Radio, and iTunes. Download and listen today.
I suppose I still can't say something about Transformers, can I?
Come
Good.
on, man.
No.
What about sports?
That sounds good.
Yeah, that's all right.
You've just listened to GeekCast Radio on the GeekCast Radio Network. There are several ways to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show. First, visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on all of our different podcasts. Second, you can rate our show and leave us feedback in iTunes. Third, follow us on Twitter at GeekCast Radio. Fourth, become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/GeekCastRadio. Call the voicemail line 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you are leaving the message for and your name. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.